Screenwriters Beat strategy session. Da-da-da! Today we have with us, I'm really honored actually to have Chris Soth. He is best known for the $1 Million Mini Movie Method, which I've read years ago and love it, and so thrilled that an actual book has now come out for the masses, which we'll talk about later. But I'd also like to think of Chris as a script mentor. He's a produced writer as well as a logline guru. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Anne. It's a real pleasure to be here. The honor really is all mine.
Well, we've been trying to get you on for a while, so I thank you very much for taking the time to finally be here and give us some great strategy sessions. I mean, that's the goal of the strategy sessions, is to give working writers and writers trying to break in some tips and some strategies to make that happen. And I know that one of the best places to start is a logline, and I've seen you work your magic. Can you give us some tips on how to make a logline better?
Well, you know, there are sort of two levels, two ways that we view loglines, or I divide it into two categories anyway. And so let's use those for now. There's that very sexy one that you might say to someone in an elevator when you're trying to entice or seduce them into reading the script or getting involved with you in business and developing the script with you. Then there is the one that, in my opinion, is sort of the defining essence of the screenplay. And I think the second category is much more important to the writer. When you are writing the screenplay, when you're developing the idea, I think that question of that you ask yourself, well, what is this really about, is answered by the logline. And when people ask you what is it about, the answer is the logline. I think of the logline, and this is I try, when I teach and consult, not to give you the stuff that's in all the other books on loglines and all that stuff. So I'm the only person I've ever heard say this, and that is that the logline is the Socratic form of the screenplay. If you remember philosophy, if you ever took any in college, the form was defined by Socrates as the defining essence of the thing, that which is only the thing and no other thing is, right? So your logline is what only your movie is. To really simplify it and get away from Socrates and all that heady stuff, I would say, if I put your logline at the end of the question, hey, what's that movie where? And put your logline there. There's only one answer. Only one correct answer. So if I say, what's that movie where the rich girl falls in love with the poor boy on the doomed ocean liner? There is only one answer. Okay, so and so that said, the logline is what only your movie is, and no other movie is or ever will be. Right. So how important is it that you know that and are able to define that? Right. I think as a writer, that's incredibly important. So I think. I made it a little hard for you because it was sort of a quiz there where the answer was Titanic. But if I said a rich girl falls in love with a poor boy on the Titanic, I would have given away the answer. But those are the three elements that I use, okay? And so my logline template that boils it down to its essence, to the defining essence, is the protagonist versus the antagonist and the world or backdrop in which or against which the movie takes place. So a rich girl falls in love with a poor boy on a doomed ocean liner, right? I have them they're right there in that order. And I can take almost any movie and boil it down that way. So if you have a good handle on your protagonist, on your antagonist, and the world or backdrop that your movie takes place in, you're golden. And then you can add the sexy. For when you're pitching it, you can say, it's forbidden love on the greatest ocean liner disaster in history. Yes, it's the Titanic. A rich girl falls for a poor boy, and will they survive in the icy waters of the Atlantic? You can do whatever you want there to really make it sound hot. But for you to really know what your movie's about as you write it, and to keep answering that question, what is this script doing? Who's my hero? What are they against? What is this world going to be? And by the way, you can change any of those three things, and you have a different movie. So
right. So
I
it's a
say,
great. So you're saying, sorry, you're saying it's great to start with a log line just to help you write the script, and then you can turn into your sexy log line for pitching.
and then making it sexy is all about marketing, but still you're tapping into what's exciting about that very basic idea.
I like that. And so when you, because I've seen you sit and listen to people's pitches and turn them around into something sexy. So what are some of the things that you do for that?
Well, I don't know. I think I am boiling it down to those elements, and then asking myself, what is sexy about that? Why is that exciting?
Oh, okay.
Right? It's not. I wish I had a more conscious processing to really answer the question better. But what did I just do with Titanic? I focused on the disaster and the spectacle of it, and the forbidden love aspect, because those are two things people love to see in the movies. That breaks down a little demographically to between men and women, right? Us guys like to see big spectacle and action, and women tend to go for the relationships and love story. I don't want to overgeneralize there. Of course, there are women who love action adventure movies, and there are guys who love romantic comedies and other love stories. But that's why Titanic was such a gigantic crossover hit. Is it had that very good love story, forbidden love against that huge backdrop of spectacle that we're all curious about, and is a very high concept. So I'm tapping into that. I mean, I'm tapping into those two things that people love to see in the movies: love and spectacle. So emotion and and the spectacular. I guess in that case, when you saw me sex it up in that for that movie, like James Cameron needs my help. But it
sounds like that's a great way to develop a concept too. You could start with your log line before you even outline, right?
Right. And I think you should be able to see it in the log line, whether it is high concept or whether it's going to be any good. I generally feel like I know if I want to see the movie by hearing the log line. And then I go or I don't go, usually based on that, sometimes based on a major star or, it being another Marvel Comics movie, or I've got to go for work or something like that. But,
yes.
But for the most part, when I'm really a consumer and have my consumer hat on for the movies, it's usually the log line that gets me there.
Right. Well, I think that's a great strategy session right there, because I know that most of the log lines I've ever written, I've written them after the fact. I've written my story, and
right.
So I should do it.
I think that's sort of backwards. If you'll excuse me. I mean, and I know there are people who say do it that way, and also say title your script or your story after it's done. I'm not saying that these things won't change, that the log line won't change after you have a draft or several drafts in, or the title won't change after you have a draft or several drafts in. But they're really vital steps in telling your story. So why not take them first? I sort of feel like that log line is so important because it really does define everything, and you will continually sort of guide yourself in the writing of your script if you have that log line. If you say, well, is this that story? Am I telling that story? And it will keep you from going down sort of a million rabbit trails that you're only going to cut later.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. Yeah, you're getting the essence of the story, the best part of your concept even.
Right. So, I always think I interviewed Robert Zemeckis when I was a student at USC, and he was driven in a big black van that was an office on wheels. And my first impression of Robert Zemeckis was he was sitting in that office, and I saw only these crossed legs, and I heard him talking on the phone. In this van that had a desk in it and everything, and satellite, and like this is back in the mid 90s, before such things were common. And he had been driven from Santa Barbara, and the first thing I hear him saying is, "No, sorry, that's not what this movie's about." And it was a great character introduction right at the movies for me, because I didn't see his face, all indirect, and yet he is really giving what he is. He's saying, I keep the movie on track, And I think the writer holding the log line first and foremost in their mind, if they have a good log line, and it really is the
Right.
defining essence of this story, is going to do that better than anything else.
Great. Do you believe in testing out log lines on other writers or just random people in a
Oh,
line
sure.
at the grocery store?
Well, I have friends that I trust for that kind of thing. I hope you do
That's
as
good.
well.
Yes.
If you have to go to random people in the grocery store, maybe that's a bit unfortunate. But I have a writers group that I do it with. Sometimes I do it with my own mentees, and I test market things a little bit. But friends I trust and other writers and things like that, I do believe in testing them out and saying, this seems really good to me. How about you? And I would say, as often as not, they point out to me what the real problem is and say, yeah, well, you're deluded, Chris. In that case, and that does, now that I've written a lot of scripts, keep me from spending 3 to 6 months on a script that may be commercially doomed or doomed for other reasons because there's something coming out that's competing, or it was made 10 years ago or 30 years ago or 50 years ago and I didn't see it.
Oh, that's true. That happens a lot. Now, do you want to tell, what did you learn from getting your first script made into a movie that we might like to learn from?
So much, and I don't want to sound like I'm complaining, but that the role of the writer is small, and it's a collaborative process. And at a certain point, at least when you're dealing with a big studio, if you're not a writer-director and raising your own money and working on your own piece, the thing takes on a life of its own and becomes much bigger than you are, and you can't stop it.
Yeah, right.
And arguably you shouldn't,
Right.
because you're financially incented to keep it going and all of those things. And the other thing I would say that I really wish and I say this all the time, you may have heard me say this in interviews with Hal Krosman, that I wish someone had said, this is all about building relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Meet the people on the set who you're going to make your next movie with. And focus on the future and make your next movie now. The die is cast with this movie, in all probability. Once the script is locked and all that. I was actually on the set doing rewrites, and I really wished I had smelled the rose a little more and enjoyed it a little more, and it would have helped me in my business too, if I had. Really, focused on building relationships with the other people, who were there, who are still making movies like me. But I'd have a much better crew in my next movie, or a much better experiences, and be working with, lots more people and on, I think, better movies if I'd really focused on that. Likewise, I say that to everybody, since this is about career strategies. That's at the very sort of end of what may happen to you. That you might be far away from that now, but you should, so I started at the far end, but I would say when you query an agent or manager or a producer to read your script, that's about building a relationship too. When you follow up on that query, that's about building the relationship. When they've read your script and you get feedback from them, or even a pass, you should use that as an opportunity to build a relationship, because what happened to me is rare. And for those who don't know, the movie that Anne refers to was bought as a spec script by people who had never met me. When it was submitted to them by an agency, that was rare then and is even more rare today. What is far more common?
And the movie was Firestorm, right?
Yes, the movie is Firestorm. Was released by 20th Century Fox, and
it's great.
Big action adventure movie set in a forest fire. To refer to the earlier part of our lecture, a smoke jumper battles escaped cons in the biggest forest fire in Yellowstone National Park's history.
Great logline.
Thank you. And so and I have a longer, sexier one too. But it's so that.
But the way you did it wasn't standard, right?
That was rare even then, and is much more rare now. What does happen much more often is some demand for a script or a mandate comes from a studio or a mini major studio or some funder from overseas who wants to get into the movie business and would like to do something like blank, and Ann Kimbrough has just called that producer with whom they have a relationship today, that very same day, saying, I have a script like blank. Do you have any ideas there? And that producer goes, aha! I was just talking to Ann. Let me give her a call and see how like blank it is, and maybe it'll be perfect, or maybe Ann and I can start to kick around some ideas, because we hear about this stuff in business and in relationships, and everywhere. People don't marry the perfect mate for them. They marry someone they meet, at the right time. People don't hire the right person. This is in business here. They don't really conduct those exhaustive job searches. They hire the guy they spoke to, the last guy they spoke to who could do that job, or someone nearby. Likewise, by building these relationships and sort of keeping in everybody's face, and reminding them, I'm a writer, I write this kind of thing, and having a lot of relationships and people who know that is what's going to pay off far more likely than sort of the lottery win sort of experience I have. And so it should be about relationships when you query. It should be about relationships when you get read. It should be about relationships when you are getting your feedback about getting read. It should be about relationships when you are talking about what they're looking for with the people who read your last script, who have said, send your next one. Okay, great. What are you looking for? And it should be about relationships when they option your script, when your script is in development, and when you're on the set.
Great
because
point.
we're not just trying to get that one movie made and that one script optioned or purchased. We're trying to build a career of many movies, lots of films, and lots of things that we're going to make. And I have to say, I was somewhat short-sighted on the set of Firestorm. I was just worried about that movie at the time, and I had producers who were telling me, just forget it, move on, go to the next one, start writing your next script, start have fun on the set while you're sneaking off into a trailer to write another script, which I was also doing. But and I think that's the advice I feel like I get that I don't hear sort of in the standard rap everybody gives on queries and that kind of thing. And I can say that it carries all the way through to Firestorm 3. Had there ever been such a movie, I should have been worrying about Firestorm 4 and 5 and all the spin-offs and all that kind of thing. And that's something that I tell my mentees, and that I would think your listeners would be well suited to worry about as well, because it's not only that they aren't killing themselves to find a writer, and conducting and interviewing thousands of writers when they're looking for a certain script. They're really looking for the easy answer, someone who already has it, or someone they know writes fast, or someone they just spoke to the other day. Right. Likewise, it's not always the best writer who gets the gig because of that. Right?
So I love it's a great strategy, because you're saying as much as you have to spend time writing, you need to spend an equal amount of time networking and building these relationships.
Whether it's an equal amount of time or 25% of your time, okay. I would say, as you have more scripts, there will be, more time. I can say, remember my beginning days as a screenwriter, I probably had to spend 4 times as much time as I had before marketing when I had 2 scripts as when I had 1. Because the second script was higher concept, I learned a little and was better and was getting more requests. Likewise, I was getting lots of send us your next one. Well, guess what? If you read the first one, in the second round, the first one was my next one. They had no camera in my room finding out which one I'd written first. So, I really remember, and I was, this is how old I am. We were sending out hard copies of scripts in those days, right? And I remember literally, taking a script that I had just sent to William Morris and putting an envelope for CAA, and a script that had just come back from CAA and putting an envelope from William Morris and sending them out, the same day, because both said, please send us your next one. And I, dashing off a quick note that said, here's my next one, coincidentally just finished, right? So, and I would do that kind of without a thought. And then when you have 10 scripts, and you're hearing that kind of thing, there's always a next one, and that's very easy to build a relationship with someone that likes the first one they've read, and then now they're becoming acquainted with the body of work. And even then, it's still unlikely, pardon me, that they get a script from you, and they say, "This is it. Let's shoot it without changing a word."
Yeah. Paul Haggis. Only that happens to Paul Haggis.
Yeah. Far more likely is, that reminds me of this idea that I had, or this article we own, or they're looking for somebody to adapt this video game, or let's call them in on a meeting and take this this thing that's on page 5 and turn that into a whole movie.
Right.
Because everybody wants to be a chef and nobody wants to be a waiter, I guess. But and also
good analogy.
If they can get that and when that happens, particularly early in your career, you should do it. And I think I am guilty, partially from having made some money quite early in my career, of being a little bit spoiled and not doing a lot of that. Not saying, okay, I'll you have that idea, I'll write that idea on spec. I stopped doing that because I had made a lot of money. I should have done more of it, because when you have that relationship with somebody and they say, hey, write something like this, well, they're invested in it. And you have their interest now, and that will be a great opportunity to build a relationship, and you should enter that like a development relationship. And, hey, I'm working on this. Here's the outline. What do you think? Here's a one-page synopsis that I'm going to turn into a script next. Do you want to see the first act? The more you can sort of get them to do that, the better off you're going to be, and then the more invested they are in actually, whatever the next step may be, getting it to their boss, getting it funded, getting it before the cameras, whatever that might be. You may not be able to early in your career get them to pay you money, but you might be able to get them to pay you with their time, and you'll be surprised how people don't want to waste that currency. They want that to pay off.
Because they don't want to start over with somebody else, right?
Right. Yeah. They this only happens retroactively, right? When we're on the set, do we say, "Aha! Now it was all worth it," and things we spend a lot of time on, it's only retroactive, but we get very invested in that, and we as writers who spend so much time in a script, of course, are very invested in seeing it go before the cameras or whatever end game we think it is. Likewise, if someone in the development world spends a lot of time on that, they become invested, proportionally to the amount of time they spend. They have a little bit less because they're probably doing that with 10, 15, 20 scripts to the one or two that you might be, maybe let's say you're some sort of genius who can juggle a lot of stuff. 4 scripts that you might be developing, at one time, but nonetheless, you can see that, and if they are, spending time burning calories, burning shoe leather, whatever they might do, now you have an ally, and that ally might have entree to whatever the next step is to you, getting read at a higher level, going before funders, and that kind of thing.
Great. Well, I love that you brought up that these spec assignments and rewrite assignments are something worthy to look into, and that is sometimes the way to get started in the industry. And what I like is that you have the mini movie method. It's actually the $1 million mini movie method, which is a great way to approach a script idea and break it down to know how to write it. Correct?
Well, I think it's the best way. It's certainly the best way I've found. And it's, I don't often tell the story this way. I mean, I usually just say it's what I learned at USC. But I did sort of train myself because I was being asked to come up with a lot of stories. If you're lucky enough to sell a spec script and it's featured on the first page of Variety, you will have a lot of meetings. Probably 75 meetings were generated by my being in that position, and something like half of those are going to say, we have this idea for a script, and it's usually very nascent and ill-formed. They don't have act breaks. They don't have, it might be, if you're lucky, a good log line that makes you see some things right away. As we can, as a good log line will do. But and if you're slightly luckier, maybe it's a novel that they own the rights to. It might be an article. It might be a video game. Sometimes it's a script. And so, that trick you may have seen me do of coming up with all 8 mini movies for one log line, in a few minutes, is something I trained myself to do, because easily in 40 of those 75 meetings, I was asked to come up with a story. Not right there on the spot, but I was asked to come back with one at some point. And I will say, early in my career, I let a lot of them go by, because I just couldn't. I remember saying to my agents and managers, I can't write 5 movies in 1 week. But now now I certainly could come up with 5 pitches in a week.
Right, yeah.
Would it be polished and professional and give you every beat, and would you absolutely pay me my fee, which is well above WGA minimum, to write each one of them? No, but it would get me a next meeting, or it would get me, if I have a relationship, as I was saying, was important with that producer, and they liked me in the first meeting, and I come back and say, I'm thinking like this, and I give, and I pitch in those 8 mini movies, and they would say they could see the full movie from there, and it is the quickest way to sort of have, in my opinion, a full story. And I also, I work with a lot of producers who bring me ideas, and almost invariably, and independent investors, they say, it's all worked out. All you got to do is put the dialogue in. And I get to their outline, and Act 2 is a sentence.
Oh, no.
As far as I can tell. And so I have to be able to flesh that out, and I have to be able to zoom in on it and create stuff, and I have to be able to turn that sentence into 60 pages of screenplay. So it's been invaluable to me, and I do think it's the best way. And I think there are lots of pitches or log lines or stories or ideas that we can't put our finger on why, but they feel thin to us. We go, I don't know if that's going to sustain 90 minutes to 2 hours of screen time, right? I don't know if I have examples in mind, except they're probably movies playing right now in your local Cineplex that you come out of and say, boy, that did not sustain even 90 minutes, and it was 3 hours long. But and knowing that it has all 8 of these mini movies and the 8 tensions that support the main tension of the mini movie, for me, is the answer to the question of how will I know it's a full story. How do I know it's a whole story and it will sustain? And I think I made some other mistakes early on in my career when people would call me back for a second meeting on a script that we needed to rewrite, or an idea they had, and I would kind of say, well, I'm thinking it would go a little like this, and I didn't then tell the full story. I said, it'd start like this and it'd build up to an ending like this, and I knew I could do the second act, because I had the mini movie method, but I didn't come up with the whole thing. I sort of thought, well, you've met me, you like me, this, you read this script of mine that sold for $750,000. Add 1 + 1 and get 2. But that's not at all how it works. You really have to give them the whole story, because they don't have it. That's the missing piece that you can provide. That's what we as writers can do that they cannot do. That's why they are producers and we are writers, or they are agents, or they are managers, or they are low-level executives at a production company or a studio, and we are the writers. We're expected to bring that piece of the puzzle, and so I did sort of train myself to be able to do that pretty quickly, and at the drop of a hat, just to have some story, a good story.
Right. So you would hit
almost any log line.
So now you have your book out, thank goodness for all of us. How does that break down those 8 mini movies? And so it teaches us, so when we go in those meetings, we can do what you do.
Okay. Well, if you read the book and if you then practice and practice, you can do exactly what I do. But
Yay!
it's okay. So the book is very simply, and it is available on Amazon.com, which is fairly recent. It's actually been available.
I will put a link up just so you know, so everyone can find it.
Thank you so much. I believe it is still the #1 bestseller in the screenwriting niche for Kindle right now. I'm pleased to say, keep it that way, please. But the book first deals with tension, because I put that at the forefront of all my teaching. I think that tension is why we love movies. Sigmund Freud said in his first book, The Pleasure Principle, that all pleasure comes from the build-up and release of tension. So if a story doesn't have dramatic tension, then we're not going to take pleasure in it, which means in the movie theater we will be bored, which is what I am fighting against and why I teach as well as writing instead of just writing. And I'll say it here, tension is simply hope and fear. Every movie has an outcome we're hoping for and one we're in fear of.
Good point.
We hope that the hero will accomplish his or her goal. We fear that they shall suffer great consequence, perhaps even death, in the attempt. Right? And you'll notice that I attach stakes to that. I didn't just say we fear they won't. That's neutral. That's how it is for 3/4 of the movie. No, they're going further and further on the limb and risking more and more as they go, and the stakes will increase, both in what they're risking and very often in what the antagonist is bringing to the table. So we hope something will happen. We fear something else will happen, and all the events in a story are made to swing that pendulum from fear to hope, from hope to fear, from fear to worst fear, from hope to fonder hope. Whatever it may be, you've got to move the needle on that tension meter and then resolve that tension in an interesting and surprising way. So a story has a main tension. Guess what? Each mini-movie has its own tension.
Oh, cool.
So the tensions of the mini-movie support the tension of the movie. And guess what? Even smaller, every scene has a tension as well that supports the tension of the mini-movie, which supports the tension of the movie. So the first 50 pages of the book or so are all about tension, and tension being hope and fear. And the reason I prefer mini-movies to acts is an act is not necessarily defined as a tension. It's almost, aside from those act breaks, end of Act 1, end of Act 2, sort of arbitrary as to what the second act is or the third act is. I don't see something that defines it. For me, a movie is defined by its tension. A mini-movie is defined by its tension. A scene is defined by its tension. Tension resolves, scene over. Tension resolves, mini-movie over. Tension resolves, movie over, roll credits, go home. So so the first 50 pages are spent on that, and then there is a chapter on each mini-movie and what it will tend to do. Mini-movie 1 will do this. And it speaks in a broad generic template, then offers examples from genre. So in mini-movie 1 in a romantic comedy, we will generally meet a boy and a girl and see their ordinary lives. And at the end of mini-movie 1, very typically is the call to adventure. It's always the call to adventure, but it's boy meets girl, right? So, I didn't make that phrase up. It may surprise you. So you'll see them in their status quo, and the tension there will sort of be obliquely created, like, oh boy, this girl is absolutely wrong for that guy, and now they've met, and she has set her sights on him, and now hilarity will ensue, right? So that resolves the tension of mini-movie 1. How's this shy guy going to get on in life? Here comes this woman bent on destroying it. And on then to mini-movie 2. And so then the middle 8 chapters are all about how you write a good mini-movie 1, then a good mini-movie 2, then a good mini-movie 3, etc. Repeat times 8, right? Mm-hmm. And then the final probably quarter of the book is about how to break things down even further if you have to. Listen, I think that having a system that breaks your screenplay down into 15-page sections maximally versus a 30, a 60, and a 30 is 4 times better, easily. But sometimes, and we've all had these days as writers, you have a 15-page stretch ahead of you and you cannot figure out how to write that, or you have what you figure might be a 3 or 4 page scene ahead of you, and you can't figure out how the hell to break that down either. So it's all about just breaking it into smaller and smaller pieces. So what the mini movie method does, in my opinion, wonderfully well, is breaks it down to smaller, bite-sized, more manageable chunks. But I sort of show you as you go on how to break even those chunks down ad infinitum into the smallest possible pieces that you have to. And I sometimes, can show you and have, when I've had to write a speech, just in like an 8-sentence speech for a character, I've broken that down as well, using essentially a mini movie template. When I've been really stuck for a key speech that the character has to give, usually in the 3rd act, I say, well, what should they do? Well, they should recap the entire movie here. The whole movie should be in this speech, and that works very well with sort of 1 sentence or line per mini movie. So that's what the book is, and I think there's another book out there that called The Sequence Approach that is also written by a graduate of USC that approaches this. But this is the only place that you really get the mini movie method in depth outside the hallowed halls of USC, and it has not just the benefit of everything I learned at USC in that book, but the 20 years of experience I've had since of really diving down and focusing laser-like on it and really trying to figure out what each mini movie is. Because I don't even think at USC they know the gold that they have there. So
well, they should.
I shout it from the rooftops, and I say, fight on. But
well, another great thing about your book is that it talks about specific genres and what happens within each of the mini movies for a certain genre too.
Right.
Yeah. So that's helpful.
I do that as well, and that I go into even more depth on that in a video course I have and an audio course as well. I spend a whole day on the genres there, and that is available as well, but not presently on Amazon, only through my website, milliondollar.screenwriting.com.
Super. Well, to me, it's a great book, and I definitely recommend it to everyone. And not only for someone maybe that doesn't like outlining, this is a way to outline fast. So it's invaluable, and I think the faster you can write, as you were saying before, the more product you have ready to network with, the better your opportunities to get out there and get work.
Yeah. Well, when something comes up in a story, we call it a turn or a twist, and I feel like this is really like having those turn-by-turn directions in MapQuest. I almost don't care what happens. If I'm driving up to LA today, I don't care. How long I'm on the 405. I really want to know where I get off. But you need more than the beginning and end of your journey. You need the 8 turns that you've got to make along the way. And if 2 is good, right? End of Act 1 and end of Act 2 is good. Well, 8 is got to be, it's simple math, 4 times better. That's why I said 4 times better earlier. And to know what those are and never be more than 10 or 15 pages away from a turn, and knowing how that you're building attention every page, I think is invaluable. And that's why I sort of tried to bring it to the world outside of USC. And I was surprised to learn it wasn't being taught. When I first started teaching, I just thought, well, I assumed you just got the 3-act structure if you bought a book. But if you took a class, you got this. And I was stunned to learn, when my students' eyes widened, that was not being taught. And I realized, well, then I guess it's up to me.
It is. Well, I'm glad you took on that mantle, that campaign. I read it, like I said, years ago, and so I'm going to get the new one because it sounds like you've added a lot to the mini movie method, and I heard it first from you. You've spawned a new generation.
You were an early adapter then.
I was.
But it does seem now that if you do screenwriting, you've at least heard of the mini movie method, and people have spoken about it. And it seems like we're slowly changing the way scripts are written. I will also say,
have an upcoming class, or you have classes through Screenwriting U still?
I do offer classes through Screenwriting U, and we'll have, and I'm very pleased to say they've developed a 30-day class based on the mini movie method at Screenwriting U, where you actually write a script in a month, and it's just emailed to you as a series of exercises. There are MP3s and recordings of Hal and I talking about each mini movie there.
Oh, great.
And in that class, and we add something every time we offer it. There's another analysis of another movie that I break down. Usually one that has just come out in theaters, or you can still see while in theaters while you're studying. Where I break it down into its 8 mini movies for you, and a bunch of and it's a great course. People rave about it, and lots of people actually do finish a script in that month. I also do offer mentoring through Screenwriting U, and of course I do all of my mentoring with the mini movie method. A very common session that I will have with a client who's in my mentorship program will be reading mini movie 1, 2, 3, up to 8, and getting my comments. So it'll be an hour session. We read 15 pages aloud together. I give my feedback for the next 45 minutes on that session. Go very in depth as to that mini movie, what's coming up, and how to really improve that script and keep it on track with that log line, which is its defining essence. Obviously, the first meeting will probably be on the log line of the story and how to really hone that. So yes, all of those things are available through Screenwriting U, and the videos and audio courses are available either at milliondollar.screenwriting.com, or if there's something hinky there, you're free to email me, Chris Soth at AOL.com.
Super. I'll put up all those links. Everyone at Screenwriters Beat is a huge fan of Screenwriting U. We all came out of it. And
I'm
I know
a huge
several.
fan of Screenwriting U myself.
Good. I'm not surprised. Yeah. And even some of our panelists on the regular Screenwriters Beat sessions, they're some of your mentors, or mentees, I should say.
I know I have several
that
are on your roster. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Thrilled to have them.
So we're all dedicated to the same cause of getting everybody out there writing and working in screenwriting. And so I thank you so much, Chris, for giving us such valuable information today and taking the time to continue to share your knowledge.
Well, thank you, Anne, and thank you to all the screenwriters out there who are watching and listening. In fact, thanks a million.
We'll catch everybody again on another Screenwriters Strategy session. Thanks for watching. Bye.